With Donald Trump's Justice Department under strain, and not just from what you might say is the legal community, which has clashed with this DOJ, or Democrats who are the opposition party, we're talking about very conservative Republican senators who are saying if they don't change gears, Donald Trump's nominee for Attorney General won't get confirmed. This is, of course, the acting AG, Todd Blanche. And this is pushback at a time that actually matters, where senators have leverage. Now, this is following a meeting with Blanche. Epstein survivors have said that even though he had to be forced in that meeting as one of the terms from one of these senators, a Republican, by the way, to even get the nomination vote, they still don't think he's up to the job. And they are urging the Senate to oppose and block his nomination. Now, the Republicans who are, of course, key here are the names you might have heard because they lost their primaries when Donald Trump intervened, Cornyn and Tillis. Now, the letter to them says survivors received an hour of deflection, interruption, and gaslighting. Blanche showed no remorse, and that it felt like a box-checking exercise, and a vote to confirm, they argue, would at this point feel to them like a vote against sexual assault survivors. Now, that is just one of the lines of pressure. There is also both of these Republican senators trying to get a commitment, something real or in writing, to get Blanche to fully end once and for all this controversial, currently frozen MAGA crime fund. Now, we have more on that tonight as well, but the bottom line is we hear this narrative about how Republicans never stand up, and I would tell you that narrative is true on most issues most of the time, but not all the time. Neither of these two Republicans, as of this hour, as of right now when I'm telling you the news, have committed to voting for Blanche, and they could end him, end his nomination. Now, here was Senator Cornyn speaking out about all this today.
The problem is, if you're going to serve on President Trump's cabinet, he's going to try to bend you to his will as much as he possibly can, and the Attorney General needs to maintain some level of independence because he represents the entire country and law enforcement, chief law enforcement officer. So we still got some work to do, but the markup isn't until the 30th, so we have some time.
Fact check, true. Maybe late true, maybe partial true, because these senators, including Senator Cornyn, have not exactly been paragons of independence, of doing the standing up to Trump that he just described as necessary. He didn't do it. In fact, it was his only infraction in Trump's view was years ago being critical of him. But as a voting MAGA Republican, he has been in lockstep with many, many things that Trump has demanded of this party lately. Now, Blanche faces court losses and the other big issue I mentioned, which is his effort to set up something that, best we can tell, is unprecedented, illegal, and a terrible idea. The billion-dollar crime fund on Trump's behalf. That's money that would go to hand-picked Trump allies, maybe Jan 6 people, maybe not. They were so kind of suspicious and guilty about that, they wouldn't really say. And that thing has been blocked in the courts. It is probably illegal. I say that was unprecedented, so it's not like we have a Supreme Court ruling on anyone ever trying this in the past. What's interesting and important tonight is these two Republican senators are saying that thing's got to be fully dropped for good to get their votes. Now, Democrats on the Hill convened several witnesses who discussed why Blanche, in their view, should not get this promotion. Senator Booker also discussing the stakes at DOJ.
We have witnessed over the last 17 months a systematic dismantling of that ideal of integrity, not through a single act, but through a pattern, bending the department away from the Constitution and toward the personal and political interests of one man, facilitated by the subservience of another.
That's the concern as laid out by Democrats. A couple notes here. One is, we often hear about how Democrats aren't doing enough. What else can they do? They are in the minority. Today is an example where you're seeing them doing extra. It's summer. This is a period where often they might even be on recess. And above and beyond the original hearings, they are trying to use their powers and their platform, the way they use the Jan 6 committee, to speak to the nation on these issues of import, even without being in the majority. The second point that is a little obscure, but if you've been watching the news or MS Now, formerly MSNBC, for years, you might remember all of that period in the Mueller coverage, which is relevant to my upcoming guest. And I can tell you that when we used to call down and check facts or double check a question or ask something that we were hearing about the Mueller probe, the person we often spoke to was a guy named Peter Carr, one of these behind-the-scenes people you hear about at DOJ. And I can just tell you, as a legal reporter, I always found him to be straightforward, above board, and never leaky, even though we might have preferred otherwise. And so this is one of many people who served inside the Justice Department and served with people of distinction. Mueller, who I mentioned, and later Jack Smith, who tapped him for a similar role. Now, we know that Blanche removed him last year. Only Blanche can say the reasons, but he discussed Blanche's conduct at DOJ, and again, with the background of years of service, someone tapped by Bob Mueller to do the job. Mueller, of course, was a Republican appointee at one point and comes from that tradition, at least in D.C., but considered very independent and nonpartisan. And then, of course, tapped by Jack Smith, and we've all seen his courage and credibility lately. I give you that background for someone who isn't usually on camera because they're behind the scenes, discussing Blanche undercutting the credibility of the DOJ.
Blanche has fired or overseen the firings of hundreds of DOJ employees, usually without notice and for improper, unlawful reasons. But these firings aren't just unlawful. They're also incredibly damaging to the department and its law enforcement mission.
With all that in mind, we turn to someone who also helped lead the Mueller probe, who served alongside Mr. Carr, is Andrew Weissmann, also former FBI general counsel. Welcome back.
Nice to be here.
I'm not a fan in these circles where it's like, oh, I know somebody, so that's like cozy DC. I don't mean it like that.
Yep.
What I mean is Mr. Carr is among many, many other nonpartisan public servants who we don't hear about. I don't think most people have ever seen him on TV,
right.
Who Mueller trusted, who I believe you trusted, who I believe Smith trusted. And these are the people coming out to say, wait a minute, this isn't ideological. You know, there have been conservative attorneys general, fine. But there's something more rotten here. Can you give us your view and context on this?
Sure. Well, let's just take Peter Carr as an example, though. So he did serve as the press person, as you noted, for Jack Smith and for Robert Mueller, but he's a career person. He served for many, many people of both parties. So the reason he was doing that was just because he's really good at his job. And the Peter Carr, the clip that you just played, in case people, that's not him being nervous. That's not sort of him not acting out of the ordinary. He is a quiet, soft-spoken, but diligent and incredibly capable person. Now, the joke was always in the Mueller team was like he had the easiest job in the world because, you know, the issue was you answer the phone and you say no comment.
He never said much to me when we talked.
Right. I mean, he was a by-the-book person. And the idea, this is the kind of person who, when you are in the Department of Justice, you are trying to keep the best people. These are people who usually have a lot of other options. They can make a lot more money. They have pressures if they have families to put them through school. And there are lots of reasons people leave unrelated to the love of the job. And you're trying to keep these people in the department because they're so valued and they're so good at their job. Peter Carr would be like the number one person in that position you would want to keep. And so of all of the many, many sins of Todd Blanche, this is so performative in terms of, as he boasted at a conference, which is, you know, he got rid of, and the department's gotten rid of people who worked for Jack Smith and isn't that great? That is just so anathema to how you should run the department. And it fits in with what Senator Cornyn was saying, which is you need to be independent. Remember, it was Senator Sessions, when he became the Attorney General, his sin was being independent. And that's why he was gone. And that is something that you see Todd Blanche saying, he is not planning on being independent. There's no signs of that.